Holy cow! So many submissions. There's more than I could possibly answer in the what I hope will be a 30-minute video. I got questions about newborns, babies and toddlers, and even questions about a mom's own sleep that never recovered from becoming accustomed to her children's wake-up patterns, even after those issues were resolved. Whew. And when I was going over your questions, I noticed some similar themes. Some of you are struggling with frequent nighttime wake-ups or visits, and some of you with painfully persistent early mornings. Others have issues with their toddlers who won't self-settle, resulting in a whole lot of effort from the parents' part, and I imagine you all are feeling pretty exhausted. These questions that you've sent me, they might seem simple, but they're actually quite complex, and you might be happy to hear this because what it means is that you haven't been doing anything wrong. The reasons these sleep issues persist are many, and I won't be able to address all the interconnecting parts, but hopefully this video will provide you with some valuable information or maybe allow you to shift your perspective just a little bit. Sleep is so mundane. You know, it's something we just do every day, and yet it's so profound. We all need sleep, and virtually every living thing on the planet has some form of sleep, even plants, and yet we don't really understand why we need it, but we know what happens when we don't get it, and yet getting to sleep and staying to sleep can be a really big struggle for a lot of people. Parents know the struggle well. Something like 85% of parents struggle with sleep issues at some point in their child's life. So if solving these issues were easy, they would be solved. The secret is to get to the root of the issue, which in the format of this video is a little bit tricky because I can't sit down with you one-on-one to hash out all the details and to really figure it out. But I'll do my best based on educated guesses and the little bit of information that you've given me. So the first question is from Annalie Morton, who messaged me on Instagram, and she writes, "My 10-month-old can sleep through the night. She just won't. I'm not averse to crying it out, and I'm so tired, so I just let her fuss on and off all night on Sunday. It worked for the most part, but we're seeing no improvements. She's still waking up and fussing and wanting to nurse several times a night. How can I break this? I'm so exhausted, it's like having a newborn." Oh, Annalie, that sounds so frustrating. I want to help. You say that she can sleep through the night, which is great. So let's examine why she won't sleep through the night. If she's waking and fussing and wanting to nurse, it tells me that she's seeking affection and closeness in the night. Now, why is she seeking this affection and closeness? Does she get to see much of you in the daytime? Is it quality time? Do your personalities clash and maybe she feels disconnected from you because of that? Or perhaps something has happened recently that has upset her. Have you talked her through these troubling events? Don't assume that because she is pre-verbal that she doesn't understand. Babies understand far more than we give them credit for. And that's part one. If you want to stop the night visits, it's important that you ensure that you're not leaving her high and dry. If she needs you, she needs you. But maybe you can shift the time when she needs you, when she needs to have her needs met, to something a little bit more reasonable. Maybe the bedtime routine can be extra snuggly and extra connective. Maybe you need to carve out 10 minutes each day to connect and bond or to help her process something that's going on for her, even just the events of her day. So that's part one. Part two is changing her behavior. In other words, sleep training. I'm glad to hear that you had some relief from letting her fuss, but the only problem is that you didn't keep it up, or at least I'm assuming you didn't keep it up. The number one most important thing beyond all the other important things that makes or breaks sleep training or any kind of behavioral change that you're working toward is consistency. So once you decide on a method that you want to use, Cry It Out is just one method, stick with it for 2 weeks. Once you get going, and once all these pieces are in place, you should see positive changes within 3 to 5 days. If you don't, there might be an underlying cause to her sleep issues that I can't identify from your comment alone. You also want to keep in mind that within this, your expectations of her, you need to be providing an age-appropriate schedule and a solid bedtime routine that helps relax and wind her down. So, good luck. The next question is from Jessica, who messaged me on Facebook saying, our 2-year-old doesn't seem to want to sleep past 4:30 to 5 a.m. His regular sleep routine is in bed and asleep by 7:30 to 8 p.m. for the night, rarely wakes during the night, up at 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m. regardless of the time change, and naps 1.5 hours on average around 1 p.m. We have tried adjusting bedtime earlier and later, and nap time, removing his nap time altogether, but he really seems to need it, and waking him partway through the night to readjust his inner clock or cycle. Nothing seems to work. Is it hopeless? Is he just an early waker? We had no issues like this with our daughter, who was older. Thanks. Okay, this is a big question. Early rising is one of the most persistent and trickiest sleep issues to overcome. But luckily, almost all cases kind of have the same cause, which is too much cortisol in the system. Now, cortisol is a hormone, and it's an extremely stimulating hormone. It's part of our fight or flight reflex. And it's also part of our circadian rhythm, which refers to the 24-hour cycle that our bodily functions are lined up with. So when we wake up, when we go to sleep, and when we get hungry, those kinds of things. And pertinent here is how the circadian rhythm functions to wake us up. When our internal clock tells us that it's morning time, our adrenal gland is stimulated and produces cortisol. So when we wake up spontaneously at our natural wake-up time, we'll wake up full of perky energy, and it's kind of like a natural coffee. But this natural wake time is really more of like an accustomed wake-up time. The circadian rhythm really likes consistency. So when our daily habits become regular, it kind of gloms onto that regularity. Let's say you eat lunch at 12:30, and if this happens every day, your circadian rhythm will quickly pick that up and begin anticipating lunchtime. So you're going to start feeling hungry at like 12:15. And the same principle applies to the morning, except that waking up isn't the cue that our circadian rhythm uses to put waking up into its schedule. The cue that it uses is lights. Since evolutionarily speaking, the circadian rhythm is designed to align with the rising and setting sun, we can trick it into thinking morning has come by turning on the lights. So this is why, when we're aiming to get a newborn sleep on track, parents are meant to keep the house in night mode at night, so dim lights, calm energy, low voices, it's nighttime, and day mode in the day where you're all bright lights and enthusiasm. It's through this process of bright days and dim nights that newborns begin to align their newly emerging circadian rhythm. And the same process applies to everybody. When you travel overseas, you're experiencing jet lag, which is a misalignment of the circadian rhythm to the sun in the sky. People who do shift work, or they're working at night sometimes in the days, other times suffer a kind of travelless jet lag. The important takeaway from this little tangent is that the first light that your son's eyes are exposed to in the morning sets his circadian rhythm. So if you want this to change, the first thing you need to do is stop turning the lights on in the morning. And similarly, a habit of eating first thing will trigger circadian expectation of a meal, which triggers hunger, which triggers waking up. And if you're already keeping the lights off and avoiding feeding your kid, good job. There's more though. And that's number one. Don't reinforce the early mornings through the circadian rhythm. Instead, just push back turning on the lights and push back the feeding a little bit later every day. Just a little bit. Then we want to consider how else cortisol affects our sleep. It's a part of our natural wake up, but it's also a stress hormone. One of the greatest ironies in sleep is that when a child is overtired, he can't sleep. This is because our bodies perceive overtiredness as a stressor. Evolutionarily speaking, what would be keeping you up at night? Likely it's something threatening that you would need to be alert in order to deal with. There's no groggy bear fighting going on with our ancestors, you know? So it's as simple as this. If your child is overtired, he will have a harder time sleeping. Likewise, if your child has significant sleep debt, he will also have a harder time sleeping. Sleep debt is the result of a chronic shortage of sleep. So someone high in sleep debt is also someone high in cortisol. The remedy for this is more sleep. You got to squeak it in wherever you can get it. Be persistent. Start pushing bedtime a little bit earlier every night. And nap time too. You're going to want to aim for bedtime to be closer to 7 o'clock than to 8. Nap time as well. You can start bringing it earlier a bit. Children under 4 are meant to get 11 to 14 hours of sleep per day. And it looks like your son is getting more like 10 to 11 hours. And if this has been going on for a long time, chances are he's accumulated some sleep debt. And this can be recovered, but it takes time. So you have to be patient while you're trying to increase his sleep. Other stressors cause cortisol too. External things like maybe there's been some recent changes in his life, like you've moved or he has a new daycare provider, or maybe there's some stresses in the home. Parental arguments can cause stress in children that affect their sleep. Perhaps something scary or traumatic has happened and he doesn't know how to process it. So the experience is just still sitting in his body. This is stressful. So the solution here is to help him process the emotions and deal with the stressors so that his body can relax and he can release the cortisol. And you do this simply by talking about what's going on, helping him identify and name his experiences and his feelings. Validating him and letting him cry will help to release the cortisol. If this is something that you think might be helpful for him, I don't know if that's a part of his experience and your experience. But if it is, it's nice to know that human beings, we cry out our feelings. Like we literally cry them out. The chemical makeup of our tears when we are sad or in distress is different than just the plain old tears that keep our eyeballs wet. And crying is one of the best ways to release cortisol. So it shouldn't be discouraged. Exercise is also helpful. So yeah, I hope that helps. The next question is from Q the Pirate, who messaged me on Instagram. And Q writes, my 5-month-old routinely wakes after 30 minutes of napping, and it's almost impossible to get him back to sleep. But if I leave him awake, he gets super grouchy. How can I help him take longer naps? I should note it often takes half an hour or more to get him to sleep in the first place. Short naps drive me up the wall. Oh. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. They're so frustrating. And they're also caused by cortisol. Again, yay. So this might be an issue of sleep debt. If you were to keep track of your baby's sleep, how much sleep he's getting in a day, and compare it to the recommended numbers. If he's getting less than 12 to 15 hours of sleep per day, chances are he's accumulating some sleep debt. And if as a newborn he wasn't getting 14 to 17 hours a day, then that accumulation has been going on for some time. It could also be an issue simply of the timing of his sleeps. So, some questions for you. What time does he go to bed? What time is he put down for his naps? How many naps is he getting? And how do you know when to put him down? Because our bodies interpret sleeplessness as a stressor worthy of cortisol, it's important that you don't delay in putting your baby to bed as soon as he shows signs of sleepiness. You don't rush him to bed and throw him in there. There's still a process of winding him down, but the important thing is to not miss that window of sleepiness. So it can be as short as 5 minutes. So when you're first trying to figure this out, you need to have major eagle eyes on your baby. The waking up super grouchy is also a sign of tiredness. His nap's not over yet. He's not finished sleeping. But he's waking up because of this cortisol. He can't help it, and he doesn't know how to fall back asleep. So you need a two-pronged approach here. You want to make sure you're getting those cortisol levels down by reducing his sleep debt, by increasing his sleep, by putting him to bed earlier and within his sleep window. And you might want to include the emotional component I was discussing a moment ago. 5 months old is by no means too young to start validating and helping your baby to put words to his feelings. This builds emotional intelligence, and it's a really wonderful bonding practice. And so that's the first pronged approach with the cortisol. The second prong of this approach is encouraging longer naps through some method of sleep training. When I say sleep training, I don't mean just cry it out. Cry it out works, but it's not for everybody. And there are plenty of equally effective methods that are gentler. I should note, though, that for some children, cry it out and its related methods like Ferber or controlled crying is less distressing than some of the gentler ones, like the sleep wave or the no cry method. There's a lot of factors into the why, but regardless, whatever method that you decide to use, it's your decision. And whatever method that is, be consistent with it. Inconsistency is a sleep training killer. Don't start until you feel certain about what you're doing, because consistency takes confidence. And then be patient. Sleep debt takes some time to recover, and new habits take time to learn. I would give, again, anywhere between 2 weeks and 4 weeks to recover the sleep debt and learn these new habits. Consistency and patience. Good luck. And the next question is from Erica, who I have worked with before, and she writes, "Hey Susannah, our little guy has been sleeping through the night from 6 months old, thanks to your coaching, until he was a year old. Now he's 15 months, and in the last 3 to 4 months he's been so on and off with sleeping through the night. Molars, vaccines, travel, and illness have made it a bumpy road. What is the best way to deal with a grumpy baby that wants breastfeeding comfort at night during those difficult times? And how do we switch him back to a full night's sleep after breaking the rules of our sleeping training?" And it's a great question, Erica. It's nice to hear from you, too. Bumps in the road happen, for sure. Your second question is pretty easy to answer. If you've been breaking the rules, the best way to come back from that is to go back to doing what you were doing before. You'll have to make some adjustments to the timing of his sleep and some of the rituals because he's grown up a little bit. But basically you just try to fit into the same rhythms that you had before these changes, these bumps. And again, consistency is king. Once you've established this pattern of sleep training, it's pretty easy to slip back into it. It's much easier than it was to establish in the first place, anyways. Your first question's a little bit trickier. It's hard to be consistent when life isn't consistent, and we have to respond and adapt to our babies. If your baby wants breastfeeding comfort in those times, there's no problem with giving it to him, unless you don't want to do it, in which case he'll need something else to replace that. So cuddles, and maybe with his dad instead of with you. But I'm a big proponent of a proactive approach to upheaval. So if you know he's stressed about something, like travel is stressful, then talk to him about it. Let him know where you're going. Let him know where he'll be sleeping well before bedtime. You'll want to do a little bit of crib orientation if you're going to be in a hotel for the night, for example. But again, if this is a temporary thing, and he really needs comfort to get through the night, and you don't mind giving it to him, then there's nothing wrong with taking a break from the rules to meet his needs. And then once the challenging time is over, you go back to the rules. And you can even tell him why. You know, we were on the road in a hotel, so that's why you got to sleep in our bed. But now that we're back home, you're going to sleep back in your bed. That kind of thing. Okay, 5th question. This is from Syndagon on Instagram. Syndagon writes, I'm military, so I deploy a bit. Wife is basically in charge of the kids' daily routine since I don't want to mess with it. Unfortunately, she's almost 2.5 and not on a consistent sleep schedule. I worry about this because the older she gets, the more difficult I feel like it's going to be for us to get her on one, and it's also probably not good for her. Some days she'll fall asleep around 8 p.m., and whether or not we bring her to bed, she'll wake up and keep the wife up till late while I get to sleep since I have to work. I feel powerless in this, and I want to help both baby and mom, but mom is adamant in me not interfering with this. I thought about the whole forcing her to sleep, like keeping her in the room with the lights low, reading, getting a routine, but at this late stage in the game, I just don't know what to do. Oh, that's a pretty complex situation, Syndagon, and I really feel for you. It's not too late to change, so don't worry about that. It's never too late to change, but it will get trickier as things get older. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the biggest problem that I see here is this apparent lack of communication between you and your wife. I personally agree that your daughter should be on a daily routine. It is likely that whatever sleep issues that you're experiencing, this waking up and keeping your wife up, could be resolved by simply having a routine. But I wonder, your wife seems to be cutting you out of the conversation around your daughter's sleep. My advice for your first order of business is to start an open dialogue with your wife about your daughter's sleep. I would suggest expressing to her your desire to be a part of the conversation and the decisions, and show an openness to whatever she has going on. If you need advice on how to approach this conversation, a really great resource that I like to refer to is the Gottman Institute. They've been doing research on successful couples for decades, and they've got a great website with lots of articles. I'll add the link to the blurb. Okay, and good luck. Final question is from Bramble Ramble, also on Instagram. I couldn't resist this question. I know this is for kids' sleep training questions, but if you have time to answer a post-sleep training question, I'd be so grateful. Now that our 2 kids are sleeping through the night and have been for a while, how do I stop waking up every few hours? I can't break my own sleep training to get back to an uninterrupted night's sleep. The kids sleep fine, but I can't stop waking up at 2 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Oh, Ramble. I'm sorry. Um, ugh. You can do it. We can get through this. My specialization is in infant and toddler sleep, but I think I have some ideas that might help. Ramble. What is keeping you up? It might seem like a vacuous question, but really, what's happening in your days that is keeping you up in the night? Pardon me. How do you handle stress in the day? And how do you unwind in the evening? And what was your relationship to sleep like before you had children? And what do you do when you wake up at 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning? Do you clench your fists and think, oh, not again? When you go to sleep, are you anticipating these wake-ups? Are you dreading them? Because the fact is that everybody wakes up at those times, or at least close to those times. The way that our sleep cycles work, we wake up several times every night. Neurologically speaking, that's how it works. We fall asleep, we go into light sleep, we go into deep sleep, and then we start to cycle back into REM, dream sleep, which is a weird little phenomenon. And then out of REM, we come back to being awake again before cycling back down. It's just that most people don't remember it. And the only difference between the not remembering wake-ups and the remembering wake-ups is in this anticipation. So I'm going to say another thing that will sound pretty vacuous. Try not to worry about it. But really, try to change your frame of mind. If you're going to sleep with any dread in your heart about these wake-ups, about something that you're certain is going to happen, and that will happen, when it does happen, you're going to feel the sour emotions that come with having the thing that you dreaded fulfilled. So instead, accept it. You're going to be waking up at 2 and 4:30. And when it happens, instead of thinking, oh, not again, how am I ever going to sleep? Think, hey, I was right. I woke up. I'm so smart. And then hopefully after that happening a few times, it'll start to maybe become a little bit boring. There aren't as many intense emotions around being right about a mundane thing than there are about being right about a frustrating, irritating thing, right? But if that isn't enough, if it's not helping, I advise you to go to my old standby guided meditations. I love guided meditations, specifically ones of the Yoga Nidra variety, which is a form of guided meditation designed to put you in that liminal state between waking and sleeping, and often you'll find you just crash right out of it. And specifically, the Yoga Nidra guided meditation that I've linked to in the blurb, because it is my favorite. I want to crawl inside of this meditation and start purring like a kitten. I love it so much. Whew. I hope that helps. Good luck. And that's the end of Ask Susannah. I hope that anyone listening, watching this, has found at least one nugget of something useful, and I'll be doing it again next week. Take care.